Awesome, where to go? We're live. Great. I'm going to just take a quick peek at who's joined. It looks like we have some people in the waiting room. Awesome. Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today on how to shift your hiring process in the age of AI. We'll be getting started here in just a few minutes. We're going to let some people trickle in, sign on, top off their coffee. While you're waiting, please feel free to answer this poll question you see on the screen, and we will do our best to tailor the content this afternoon to what we find out. Awesome. Looks like some answers are trickling in. Looks like some people are feeling a little bit prepared, not quite prepared. AI is just crossing everybody's mind.
Caroline, you won't judge us if we put not prepared or have not even thought about it as panelists on this, right?
I would actually, Frank, I would judge you. Sorry. I would have to judge you guys. You guys are experts. But I'm not judging anybody else in the room. So we're gonna let this go for like 15 more seconds and then we'll end the poll. Cool. Excited to see people trickling in. I think this is gonna be a really great conversation.
I hope people have good questions
Me
or
too.
bad questions. All questions, just questions.
All questions are welcome. Cool. So from what I'm seeing, not a lot of people are feeling very prepared, but people are feeling a little bit prepared or not quite prepared. So Frank, Amanda, let's keep that in mind as we go through this round table, and then I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results so everybody can take a peek. Great. Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing. Great. All right. First off, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited to dive in, but before we do, I'm going to go through a couple quick housekeeping items, and then I will introduce our lovely panelists. So first things first, I'd like to introduce Mike, or you might see him here as CoderPad. He'll be working behind the scenes today. We'll make sure everything's running smoothly. If you need help with anything at all, please reach out to him in the chat. Secondly, I'd like to remind everyone here that the webinar is being recorded and you will be receiving a recording in the next couple days. So keep your eyes peeled and then you can watch us again over coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And then finally, there will be time for a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions for our panelists or myself, please put them in the chat and you can do that at any time throughout the webinar and we'll do our best to answer them all towards the end. Cool. Housekeeping is out of the way, so let's kick it off. I'm your host today. My name is Caroline Matz. I'm part of the marketing team here at CoderPad. Like I said, thank you again for joining us today and taking time out of your day to learn a little bit more about how AI is changing the hiring game. Without further ado, I do want to introduce our pros. So that's why, Frank, we can't say not prepared because I'm calling you a pro. I'm joined today by our dream team. That is Amanda Richardson, our CEO and head of people, and Frank Haubin, the global VP of product management here at CoderPad. I'm really grateful to have you two joining us. I'd say tell us a little bit about yourself, but I always feel like tell us about yourself in 15 seconds is more stress than it's worth. I'm always like, I used Colgate toothpaste, something random. So um, I think we'll just jump into some context if that's okay, and then let the
Let's
good.
do it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Cool. Like I said, I think we need a little bit of context to get this discussion started. So we know that the rise of AI is reshaping everything, including how we hire. We also know AI is not replacing developers. We've said this a dozen times, hundreds of times. Today, we're going to address how the dev role is changing and how our hiring process should follow suit. So, with that said, we do see that many companies are still hesitant to integrate AI into their hiring process. We even saw that with our poll results, which kind of leads us to our first question. What are some common misconceptions about the rise of AI and how can organizations get comfortable instead of fearing that change? So I'm gonna kick it to you, Amanda, if you want to dive in first.
Yeah. So, I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions is that, all developers are going away. I have not heard any customers really say that. That's not something we've experienced at CoderPad, to be honest. And I think our entire dev team uses some form of generative AI to make their jobs easier and more efficient. So misconception, the job's going away. In fact, benefit or misunderstood benefit is the jobs become much more interesting. It takes away a lot of the rote things you have to do. And I mean, no matter what your job is, I think AI can make life a little bit easier and a little bit more pleasant. And the benefit is also then that you have your best people and some of your most expensive people, frankly, spending their time thinking about problems and how to solve problems as opposed to like fingers on keyboard and actually pumping out the work, which is a little less mundane. So I think those are probably some of the biggest misconceptions. And then, to get the organization comfortable and less fear, start easy, start implementing, start messing around. You take a leadership role and actually try using it. We've had a lot of good success there. And then I think the other important thing or mistake I see is not creating a policy. So I'm not a queen of policies. I don't love a lot of policies, but I do think having clarity for candidates around what expectations are and your organization around expectations, what's allowed, what's not allowed, helps to get things moving a little bit faster. Frank, what you got?
Yeah, I think you point out a couple of great things in terms of the dev role is changing. And so I think a common misconception is to be so both fearful of AI and also to try and grasp on and keep the current process. I think too often when I get on and talk with customers, people are talking about how do they protect the current process and test the things they have been testing versus maybe changing the process that you're doing to befit the tools of the day. And so oftentimes with customers, they talk about testing the very thing that AI is good at doing. Testing the code and how do we keep AI out of here so that we can keep testing this thing about writing code. And in a world where AI is good at writing code, great. The skill then changes to how the human takes a look at the code output, assesses that, whether they should use that or not. There's a real skill set around that. And I think, again, keeping with that misconception or addressing it would be to actually incorporate that within your interview process. And I think that's a perspective we've taken, certainly as a product, is to bring these tools in so you can test the right skills as the role is changing.
Awesome. That's really helpful. I think actually when you say test the right skills, that actually makes me think of our next question, conveniently. We know that AI is changing the world of tech and development, but I'd love to address how developer hiring looks today. And then this is kind of a two-parter, so buckle up. How developer hiring looks today, and then I'd love to tackle how you think the future of developer hiring looks in the age of AI. And then, if we have time and it feels right, I'd like to go through what that looks like, what the biggest difference is. So, how does that differ from what most people are doing today? But let's just take it from the top. So, how does developer hiring look today?
Yeah, I can jump in with that, and then maybe Frank, you want to talk about how it should look given the tooling that's available.
That's great.
So I think probably the majority of hiring processes begin with some sort of screening element. It's usually an automated test. Maybe it's got some very short answer questions, lead code type questions, if that resonates with the audience. So these are little snippets where you're asking someone to write code from the beginning, from scratch, and then runs against some test cases for grading. You then probably move to a couple of live interviews. The live interviews are probably one or two languages and testing your proficiency on languages. So maybe if it's full stack, it's a front end, it's back end. Or even like on a data role, it's like SQL and Python. So you've got 2 or 3 technical interviews that are really just about the language and do you know the code? But obviously those skills are changing. So Frank, what's a better way?
Yeah. Again, for so long we've been doing these leak code style tests, and let's be honest, like they're a little bit they're bullshit. Like they don't test the actual skills of the day. They're not relevant or realistic. And honestly, I think if for any engineers who might be listening on the call, they would all raise their hand and say, hey, you know what? That's not actually what I do on a day-to-day basis. And so I would say that the forward-thinking companies that we work with, the LLM companies who are on the forefront of actually building these tools and using these tools, and how when we look at how they interview, it is at once a realistic, relevant experience. They're bringing in customized questions that show off their brand and the problem that they're working on. Here we are in this age of AI, and we're even more shifting away from this, call it a generic standardized test. You wouldn't give, for other roles like a sales or marketing role, like a generic test that applies equally to all companies everywhere. You should probably want to understand how they, use their skills to fit your specific business and your specific experience. And so ultimately, the challenge that we work with in working with a lot of our partners is pushing towards that realistic experience. I think oftentimes the thing that we say is ask the candidate interview what you would typically ask somebody to do in their first week or first month. That's going to be emblematic of the problems that you're actually working on. And the nice byproduct is you're not trying to then piece together, okay, yeah, but how would you really approach problems here? You're actually literally asking them problems that you work on. And so from a practical perspective, this really just means using AI tools within the interview and not being fearful of them. Give the option to use ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever your favorite tool is. Here at CoderPad, we surface that within and we have a monitored environment. But again, the most forward-thinking companies actually incorporate that within the interview process and say, it's a prompt of, hey, why don't you go ask the LLM to produce some code? Now, what do you do with that code? And that actually befits the day-to-day working style of an engineer.
Yeah,
That's
Caroline,
great.
if I could piggyback on that, I think to specifically call out differences. So like one is like making sure the questions you ask are not leak code, but are relevant to your job. Two, I think it's matching the environment in which you are doing the live interviews and even the screens to align with what you enable the tools or what the job is. And then three, I think the other one is less time in live interviews testing code or writing code, I guess, and more time around debugging and systems thinking. This is one of the things that came up in our annual developer survey, just how important it is to know systems design. And that becomes more and more important as GenAI does the code writing, but we need humans to really understand the context in which you're building a feature that fits in the system of the company's products. So there are different steps. I think the steps stay the same, but like literally the questions and the skills you test for are what need to be iterated and evolved and why you need to rethink your process.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really helpful. I think we can also touch here on there's also AI specific roles that are like, I want to say coming
Mhm.
onto the scene, but like that's probably not the right way to go about that. But AI roles coming onto the scene. And then there's also just developers who are using AI in their day-to-day tasks and world. So, Frank, do you want to touch on that a little bit, or we can hold till the end? But I think we could just even talk about how we're already shifting towards um, AI engineers.
Yeah, I think while the market still is changing and it's changing quickly, I agree with you. We are seeing this rise in, anyone of us can go look on LinkedIn under jobs, AI engineer or something similar to that in name. This type of engineer or software developer builds agents, products, features on top of existing models. So they're not necessarily working at, different customers of ours, such as like an OpenAI or anything like that. They're using the output of those as a lot of product teams do, and incorporating that. And I would say, even as we've been talking about being able to offer AI, because that is part of the workflow, I would go further and say you should almost require the use of AI within that job process, because again, that is what they're doing on the as part of their role. A customer of ours, full story, came to us the other day, And they said, hey, we're trying to hire for something like this. What do you guys think? And so I think really being able to add into the interview process certain stages that you would, again, go through in this job. How are you prompting? How are you, making use of the API? How are you balancing speed versus cost? These are real world questions that get to the heart of what you hopefully should be testing. And I think the other thing in mind, I appreciate, Amanda, how you mentioned things like debugging and systems design. These are the attributes of a whole engineer. I think beyond that, the thing you're testing through your process are some of these quote unquote soft skills. Um, how is the person communicating? How do they understand the business problem? How are they, asking clarifying questions? How are they making trade-offs? Because the real world consists of trade-offs. And I think being able to incorporate all of that within this experience, it's not just about getting to the right technical answer. I think that's less the problem of the day and more how do you find the right technical solution with the business context for my users and be able to operate in a team.
That makes a lot of sense. Amanda, is there anything else you want to add there?
I mean, no, it was one of the things that it reminded me of is there was a researcher at OpenAI who was recently interviewed who spoke about the rise of soft skills and how this really is what's going to differentiate humans, but also developers, right? And particularly as a skill set, like how are you communicating with the business? How do you take a business need and translate that into what eventually becomes code? How are you able to collaborate and work with others? How do you really articulate trade-offs, as Frank talked about, speed, quality,
Yeah,
kind of the usual things, but how can you communicate that to the business? And if you don't have questions or a set of questions in which you're evaluating those skills during your developer interviews today, maybe that's action point number one, because just doing the job, the job's changing. And so really being able to communicate and collaborate becomes even more critical. They had also some interesting things around emotional intelligence and stuff. And, for another webinar, we can
I'd
talk
say
about
we
the
do.
importance of emotional intelligence, and I'll invite my husband, but for another day. Right now, we'll just focus on developers. But yeah, I think a lot of those collaboration pieces, frankly, get missed. People get hired. They're like, they're amazing at JavaScript. They're going to be super awesome. And then we've all hired that person and then they're really hard to work with. They don't collaborate. They don't comment on code well. Bad hires are expensive. So let's not do that. And let's make sure we're checking those soft skills during the process.
I hear you. Awesome. I agree. Let's move on. Since we kind of are talking about, some hesitations or some fears, let's move into best practices. So, let's discuss best practices for evaluating developers who are using AI in their day-to-day jobs and in the interview process. Let's go through some of the common hesitations and reservations because, like you said, there can be some trade-offs here that hiring managers might face or have already faced when trying to assess these technical candidates in this new environment.
Yeah, I guess in looking at this and looking at best practices and what things people should be doing right now, I guess selfishly working here at a technical interviewing product or on a technical interviewing product, I would say honestly making sure that you have the right tool set, the right um, product, if you will, to use in your evaluation process. And I think if you're looking down the checklist of things to make sure that you have make sure you can ask that realistic question or assign that realistic project. Certainly in our case, making sure that you can take advantage of modern features such as a multi-file environment to run full applications, to turn on an AI helper within the product, to use something like a more recent feature of ours of an AI note taker and an ability to generate insights. These are the things to be looking for in a product because ultimately you can't you're going to be limited by the tool sets or the tools that you have. And so I guess that's the first thing. Beyond that, I think really taking a look, again, going back to the first misconception, you can't hold on to your current interview process. It needs to change and evolve. And so honestly, just simply look at the questions you're asking. Amanda was just talking about making sure you ask some of these, questions to make sure somebody's well-rounded. And so for us on the call, either taking a look at them directly or working with your internal teams, your engineering partners, your hiring managers, to make sure that you are refreshing them regularly. And the key things to look for within those questions, again, are making sure that they're open-ended problems that reflect real-world complexity and allow you to evaluate both the technical side of the house as well as their soft skills. If that broad evaluation criteria isn't part of your interview process, well, honestly, it should be. And so I think ultimately, if you're having trouble with that, I think that's where hopefully a good partner like a CoderPad can come in and give you that advice. I'll admit many hiring managers and or TA leaders say that there's a lot of work and they're feeling overwhelmed. They don't know where to start. Well, guess what? We're here to help. So please, we love getting on calls, working with customers, and I think that's where we get a lot of joy in our lives.
Yeah,
Amanda?
I mean, I think the second part of the question, Caroline, may have been the harder part, which is like, what are the hesitations? Like, why not? Because
Mhm.
it's work, frankly. It's like new questions you have to ask. I get that. I understand that many of us have been asking leak code questions for 10, 15. I mean, shoot, I'm old enough to remember when we did it on a whiteboard. And so it is a change to ask better, more realistic questions. It's not hard or impossible. And if you use the frame of like, what is this person going to work on in their first 30 days? Like it gives you a good jumping off point, but it is work to change the questions and retrain your hiring team around looking not just for, did this person get the right output or the right answer, if you will, but how did this person solve the problem? Can they articulate what trade-offs are? Can they solve the problem two different ways? Like you do need new interview guides, right? So you need to know better questions and then a rubric behind that. Like what's a good answer? What's a great answer? Um, Again, I'll echo Frank's comment. Like we are here to help. We work with 4,000 customers. We kind of eat this stuff up. Even if we weren't on a webinar, we'd be talking about the same thing. So
It's
please
true.
call us. We're happy to help. It is change. It is new questions. It is reevaluating your process, making sure that your live interviews become so much more critical, right? Like in that live interview, you really need to spend the time assessing the soft skills, the hard skills, evolving into like systems design skill questions, really doubling down on what you need in a developer. And so that too is change and creates resistance. And for the engineers on the call who are like, oh, I hate interviewing as it is. Please don't make me do it a different way. Like, I hear you, I feel you. But the cost of not changing is you end up with candidates who, one, don't have the skills you need. So you have a bad hire that you've now got to manage out of your team. And then two, you end up probably wasting time and hiring someone without even the skills you're testing for because it's just an antiquated way of interviewing that everybody's figured out how to hack. And so, moving away and more towards modern code development, if you will, is work, but it has huge benefits. And frankly, it's a candidate experience, right? Like we've got to care about the candidates. Like a candidate shows up and they're like, another leak code question? Like, shit, this is a waste of my time. I don't want to spend an hour like solving these SQL queries or whatever it is that you've thrown in front of me. Like they want to work on interesting things. And so you end up bouncing out really good candidates who want to use modern tools, who want to solve interesting problems because they think you don't really understand what their job is.
That's a really interesting point. I love talking about candidate experience. We could have a whole another
Me too.
webinar. Well, I think it's a huge part of the interview process too. And like you said, showing that we as a team or other organizations solve complex problems. And that would be exciting for me to join a team. So candidate experience is important.
Yeah, I think too often we think of a technical hiring as just being this other different thing, and that candidate experience is the same. It carries over. I think we all understand you wouldn't want to ask candidates different things that they aren't going to be working on or aren't prepared for. Um, Also, I think we all understand, especially the TA folks more than anybody else, that an interview experience is a two-way street. That is the opportunity for the candidate to learn as much about your company, your business problems, what it's like to work there, what it's like to collaborate. And so, I guess the challenge is really how do you infuse that within this interview environment, whether it's technical or not. It's the same kind of lessons that you should be applying.
Yeah, I'd be curious when we get to the Q&A section, like if people have like specific roadblocks they're trying to get through, like what is holding you back from making these changes? There's probably a lot of very good reasons. And I would love to just like kind of better understand and like we can help, right? Like it also gives us ideas on like what content to create, like what documents you guys need. So please, let's keep the conversation going.
Great. Let's keep the conversation going. So in the 2025 tech hiring survey, we actually saw 76% of developers shared that they're already using Gen AI and that it's useful in their work. Or 54% even said they're actively learning or planning to use AI. So it's clear that people are using it. Um, it's proved to be useful. What are some of the most exciting ways or impactful ways that you think that they're using this for their role and how it's impacting their performance?
Yeah, I think this, these recent tools, this development, this integration of Gen AI and other AI tools within the process, it's to me, I think it's exciting. It accelerates the velocity as a, when working with technical teams. As a product leader, I'm always looking, okay, let's get things out the door, let's ship. And so I'm always looking for that velocity to increase, and that certainly I love that. Um, Honestly, you can accomplish so much more with these tools than you ever thought was possible. While it may not give you the 100%, you're not going to sit there and prompt something and hit ship to production and hope that it'll scale and work for everyone. But it can at least get you the 70% solution. And then, as Amanda talked about, you're then almost doing different things. I think oftentimes I talk about it's less of a authorship and more of an editorial type of perspective that you then have. And that's at once different, hopefully exciting, and allows you to do so much more. Beyond that, it allows people to extend in different ways. As a designer, you can quickly, jot something down on on a scrap piece of paper, upload it, and get real working code behind that in a prototype. And again, that's not going to get you something that'll ship to production, but it allows you to now play around and give somebody else to click and see versus kind of look at something blank on a whiteboard or a piece of paper. And so I think ultimately these tools, I look at it as just a way to continue to broaden and accelerate development. But beyond that, it puts people in a different way of thinking. So you're probably less focused on like, what is the right function to call of, execute this to more, wait, I think this is kind of clunky. It does the job, but it's kind of a crappy UI. How do I fix that? And how do I fix the actual things that people are annoyed about?
I also really like the analogy more of an authorship or more of an editorial than authorship. I think that almost got that flip-flopped. I think that's a really interesting parallel to draw. So, um, Amanda, I'm going to shift it to you. I didn't have the question on the screen, but what kind of impact does that have on a business?
Oh, well, I mean, we as a company are all in on this. I mean, I as an individual, like, don't really write emails from scratch anymore, and or do much from scratch anymore, which actually is like the benefit, right? So one, increased efficiency, right? Everybody's got their to-do list of things that are just the stuff you have to do that's kind of mindless but minutia. And for your developers, like a lot of this tooling just removes that from their day to day. It's not that you'll end up hiring less developers, though, if you are, let's have that conversation. I'd be really curious about that. We have not seen that. What we are actually seeing instead is that the developer job just becomes more interesting. And so it's more time thinking. It frankly puts pressure on the product team to come up with more bigger ideas to work or to develop, which is exciting and kind of the right place where you want the pressure in the organization. So, well, I think most of all, it's increased efficiency. Second of all, for anybody who has the blank page fear, I have a blank page fear, right? Nothing scares me more than like a blank doc where you have to start from scratch. Like, I never know where to go, but like if I can editorialize something and pivot off somebody else's idea, I move much faster.
Totally.
And that's what ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your LLM of choice is will do for you. And so that is like efficiency, but also unblocks and makes me feel better.
Right.
And I think it'll then challenge you as an organization to come up with like bigger problems to solve to ultimately, frankly, solve more problems for your customers, right? That's why we're here. We're here to help you hire great teams so that you guys can create and your companies can create impactful software. And so my hope is that at the end of the day, the LLMs end up you having a more efficient dev team, but also being able to just ship more stuff and solve problems faster and better.
So there's a lot of impact there, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that was the long answer. Yeah. I guess the short answer is the impact on the business is good.
Hi.
Hi.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you for being so thorough. Okay, we're kind of talking about how teams can be using AI, business impact. What advice do you have for companies who are looking to balance this technology and these advancements with the human elements of hiring? And then second kind of follow-up question, because we talk about it all the time, the robots aren't replacing people, AI isn't getting rid of the developer jobs. How can we ensure fairness and inclusivity when we are adapting these changes?
Frank, you want to go? Me to go?
Yeah, I think it comes down to setting the right expectations as you enter in your process. I think, Amanda, you did allude to some of the policies you need to set of like, what is your policy? What does, can you use these tools? Is it more of an open book realistic test, or, are you on the other side and, you're where your company might not believe in that philosophy, hopefully not. But of like having a closed book, and this is how we, want to treat the evaluation process. I think candidates appreciate and desire, thirst, if I may, for that clarity. And so I think ultimately within that, setting the right expectations is being mindful of how your process might bias towards one population or another. One thing that we talked about that has persisted through time, that we see over and over with our customers is assigning something like a take home with unlimited time. And so you might look at that. How does that bias towards one or the other? I mean, it honestly biases, and studies have shown, towards people who just simply have more time on their hands, and whether that biases against maybe parents with young kids or people with jobs and maybe whatever it is. I think being cognizant of how you're treating your process. I think beyond that, also just making sure that you don't artificially constrain the tools and problems so that's not similar to the job. Again, I think it might be towards a good use case. You're wanting to ensure the integrity of your process and so on. And if you want that, then please, we, here at CoderPad, we do have tools to ensure the integrity of the process, to monitor and make sure it's a closed environment. And so turn those on and make use of those, share with the candidate that they're on. So it's a completely transparent path, but do so, in other words, turn on these integrity features, but also allow people to use the tools they and ask them realistic problems. Because again, when you're asking these, what we keep talking about in bashing leak code problems, you're honestly asking somebody to go back into a CS textbook that they may not have opened for 20 years and to study a bunch of things that they don't do in their job. And so again, you're biasing towards one slant or population of candidates that honestly you probably don't care or want that type of person. You want somebody who actually is doing the thing that already matches the job of the day. And so again, it's infusing this realism and taking this step back and looking at your process, setting the right expectations, and looking at making sure that you're cognizant of how different populations will react to your interview process.
Totally. I imagine that also helps create a more positive candidate experience as well when we keep these things top of mind.
Yeah, I mean, you have to set people's expectations. Like, I love when I don't love. I find it interesting when people reach out and they're like, so and so's cheating. I'm like, well, what you're cheating may be someone's definition of efficiency. So let's just get normalized on what the expectations are, what's allowed, what's not allowed. And I've definitely spoken to candidates who really love an AI-free environment. They're like, it's creativity. It allows me to solve interesting problems. I think it puts the onus on the company to ask great questions still. But not every candidate wants to use LLMs for everything because they love to like work on new things and try to think about new ways to solve challenges. And that is up to them. And so again, candidates setting the expectations, but also companies setting the expectations. And then just making sure that you're really checking the skills that fit the job. I think oftentimes people uh, get stuck in checking the old skills and not the new skills that are needed. And so I think, that's part of the change that needs to happen.
Cool. Thank you. I think while we talk about change too, I want to talk about solutions as well. So from a product perspective, could both of you share a little bit more about how CoderPad is evolving to ensure that hiring teams are, in fact, equipped to properly assess candidates who are leveraging AI and machine learning throughout their day and in their work?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things here that again, hopefully we've been talking throughout. Having within your product the ability to bring realistic live questions, and so again, this not a lead code question, but a multi-file environment. We're asking somebody to run and host a full application and present to them the same type of prompt that you might within the role. Like, hey, I need you to add a search bar here or whatever. And so I think that's part of it. Other things that we, our perspective and what we try to bring in. Within our interview experience, we have things like follow-up questions that allow you to dive in deeper and surface the thinking behind behind the code, if you will, and making sure that it's not just it's not as simple as like, did you get this right or wrong, but why did you choose this, and what are the trade-offs, and when presented with three different outputs from the LLM, which one did you choose and why? I think that is the experience that we've enabled through our set of features. Again, happy to talk all day about our product and all day about our features. But yeah, whether it's the follow-up questions, it's the AI assist, it's having the fully functional IDE environment where you are able to ask that most realistic questions, where you are able to bring in large data sets and do the analysis live. And then, dive in deeper and ask questions beyond the code. I think the code is fundamental. Let's be clear. You do need a set of foundational technical skills. But to me, that's often the jumping off point for that deeper conversation. And so that's why we've brought these tools into the environment and why we will continue to add in, tools so you can focus on that candidate experience. I alluded earlier to our insights, our AI note-taking, and where we're able to summarize. And what we are trying to do is enable you to both focus your attention on the candidate and get ask deeper questions within a live interview experience so that you can both get the highest quality signal, but you're also providing the best candidate experience. Again, this is people don't want to hop on with somebody who is busy, maybe over here on a different screen, much as you wouldn't want a candidate to do that. And so how do you, a lot of what we try to infuse in the product is making it simple, easy to use, and then to give you the tools so you can properly have that great conversation so you can get that best understanding of the candidate.
Really lock in. Awesome. Amanda, is there anything you want to add there?
No, I mean, I guess I'm excited about a lot of the features we have coming. I mean, I think Frank previewed a little bit some of the insights and, frankly, some of the tooling that AI is enabling us as a company to build and deliver for you all, which is exciting. So it will be fun to have more horsepower behind really giving personalized recommended follow-up questions, really helping you all find the best candidates. Look, hiring managers and developers are not intended to be professional interviewers, they're professional developers. And so the more we can do to support the interviewing process and both give our experience as well as synthesize and make that really actionable for you quickly. LLM technology is allowing us to do that, and I'm excited to launch even more of it.
I'm excited too. Cool. Thank you for adding that in.
Mhm.
So we do have a couple questions, which is really exciting. I love questions. But before we jump into the live Q&A, I'm going to throw another poll question up on the screen just to make sure everybody's getting the resources that they need before we jump into that. So, Mike, if you want to throw that poll up on the screen, we can start also looking at the questions.
I feel like we should also ask the first question, like, do people feel more prepared? You know
Oh,
what I
yeah.
mean? Like, go back to the first question and be like, are people better or worse? Do we accomplish our mission here or no? Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to drop that in the chat too. If you feel
Yeah, if we didn't hit the nail or whatever, put it in the Q&A and let's try to address it. We've got 10 more minutes, something like that.
we have plenty of time to address anything. Awesome. I'm going to leave this poll up for just a couple more seconds because we have time. And like I said, I want to make sure everybody's getting what they need. And I want to thank you both, Frank and Amanda, again for going through that roundtable and answering some of those questions. I I love hearing more about AI. I think it's just so interesting. I mean, I think everybody's using it in their own respective roles, so it's always fun
I
to
mean,
hear
I
about.
use it all day, all night, like literally. I
No,
mean,
I like when you said you're not writing emails from scratch anymore. I'm like, yeah, I don't do anything from scratch anymore.
no.
Perfect. We'll do 5 more seconds of this poll. And don't forget, like I said to our audience members, we will be sending out a recording at the very least, so you can at least reference some of the things we said. I know there's a lot of acronyms and buzzwords floating around. Sometimes you have to listen to it back one more time. Perfect. I am going to have Mike behind the scenes, our Wizard of Oz, close the poll. Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And then I think we'll just jump into questions. Like you said, we have some time. So, our first question is well, this is interesting, especially following our conversation, but how to dissuade folks from using AI for answers for our job application questions. Um, Sorry, I'm real time reading through this question. It sounds like the person who asked this question is saying that they're starting to see candidates using more AI tools behind the scenes, so without disclosing their use of AI. So I think maybe we tackle this question with how can we avoid people cheating using AI while there's a rise of AI? Um, Sorry, that was me taking two long questions and making it into one short question. Rachel, if I butchered that, feel free to answer a follow-up question.
Yeah, please jump in. I guess I'll jump in and say that, I mean, I think one, setting clear expectations, and then two, I think it is the right of the employer. If you have a suspicious situation, ask the candidate, right? Like, I think making sure that you have clear expectations on what they should and shouldn't use it for. And then if you have suspicious situations where this seems really weird or this is unusual behavior, like ask the candidate directly. I think it's a relationship. It goes both ways. You're interviewing both ways. You'd want to understand. I don't know if that specifically answers the question of how to get them to stop using Gen AI. There are definitely flags we have in the product, and we're happy to tell you about all the features we have around copy paste and unusual behavior and
I
suspicion and
think,
those types of things. But I don't know that that was where we wanted to go.
yeah, let's highlight some of those features too, because this question also asks when something is clearly copy and pasted. I guess that could be based off of a hunch or whatever tool they're using. But Frank, if you want to just quickly highlight, a couple things that we do that are built into CoderPad that identify cheating or the use of AI, that would be ideal.
Yeah, sure. So in our products, a couple features that maybe address. So Rachel will definitely see where you're trying to elaborate a little bit. And thanks for the clarification. And so certain features, we have copy paste detection. So if you're pasting something in from outside, there's a sort of transparent notification, but we do have that. We record it. We have an alert, and then our playback, which is where we record the whole session keystroke by keystroke, allowing you to review afterwards. We also have a little dots that kind of denote that. And we take a similar approach to if you leave the tab. So when you're on a tab and you go somewhere else to maybe paste in an answer or type or get some help or something like that, and you come back, both leaving and coming back, we do have notifications there. And so I guess all in all, what I'm trying to explain is that yes, we do have like the right monitoring here, as befits, an interviewing tool to understand where somebody has their cursor, where somebody has their attention, to make sure that it is this fully enclosed monitoring environment. Within our async product, we also monitor for things such as IP location and other plagiarism detectors. And so I guess, yeah, I think those are, call it foundational features that you should, of course, turn on and so on. But I think the challenge ahead is honestly getting away from these lead code questions, which are much more, there is no one right answer. It's much, it reflects reality, but it also, honestly, it's much harder to go across 10 different files and then copy paste each file into your ChatGPT window. Like it's operationally complex and you quite honestly won't be able to do that. And so there's a bunch of network effects or better benefits when you do shift to this realistic question and answer versus the, call it the lead code question where there is one best answer. And let's be honest, that's actually how the LLMs got used to learning how to code. They trained on literal lead code questions. And so of course they're going to be great at answering those.
Awesome. Thank you for highlighting that. I like this question a lot, I think, especially since we have some time, and I think you guys are the best people to answer this question. Wow, that's a mouthful. Rowan is asking suggestions for getting business buy-in for changing the interview process as you described. Sounds like Rowan's fully supportive of replacing the 1 hour coding leak code interview with a more authentic assessment, but culturally, it's hard to convince other people to do that. So, any tips there about how to get buy-in, maybe from an ELT group or a hiring team?
I think, sorry, Amanda.
No, go
I
ahead.
think sometimes there's both the philosophical change and then also just the burden of, what Amanda talked about, like, oh gosh, I got to go do this other thing. And the cost of doing this new thing is much greater than just having this crappy question that I've been hanging around. And I'm fine with the crappy thing. And so I'm not sure which one of those. I think certainly for the latter, we have examples, we have templates, we have ways of making this easier baked into our products where you can simply drag and drop from your code base and just bring something to life. And so I think certainly we have features to make that latter part to decrease the cost and to make it a lot easier to get started. I think for the former, it's as in many cases with organizational change, it's being able to explain a little bit of why. I think being able to show this is the value to the business, this is why I think this is right, and kind of those commonplace call it communication where you get buy-in from others are best practices. I think we have some materials on why we believe these are the right these are the right things to do. I think honestly, there's just also a cost to inaction. As everyone's pointing out on the many chats, keeping hold of this old way of doing things is also, it's not just a low signal, low quality interview experience. It is ripe for being, disruption or cheating from LLMs. You're literally asking somebody to, the wrong questions that don't befit the skills of the role, and then in doing so, you're also putting them in an environment where it's much easier to cheat, and you're almost begging them to cheat against you. So again, we do have the tools to maintain the integrity and so on, but at some point you also just need to change the underlying experience. Amanda, were you gonna
Yeah,
say
I may
else?
have had a slightly more cynical answer, which is, if you look at the skills or the most recent hires you've made, have they been awesome? If so, amazing, keep doing it. But there's probably somebody that maybe slipped through or whatever, or a time where you feel like you need to improve your team skill sets, or you look at the team and you're like, God, I wish we really had someone who understood this or whatever it is. Like anytime you want to change the profile that you're hiring for, you need to change the process. And I think helping the organization understand that and see the gaps in the team or the gaps in the team skills, or maybe we have this process but we got a couple people through who weren't the best fit. What can we do better? Like that's the organizational problem and that's the challenge. We at CoderPad are here to help. We will bring, we can help with questions, we can help with interview guides, we can help with, defining rubrics. I mean, candidly, I would also go to ChatGPT and be like, give me a good rubric. But I think there's like a lot of things that can be delivered, but you have to make the pain clear to the business. And the pain is that hires aren't on point. We don't have all the skills we need on the team, or maybe there's a third problem of, the business and the tools we need to create, or the products we need to create are changing. And so we need different skills to deliver that. And so maybe that's a little more like negative on the problem side, but I do think the only reason organizations change is because you bring them the problem. But as like talent acquisition leaders, I'm confident that you can think about what the pain is for the business. I'm sure you hear about it all the day. I'm sure there's a development leader who's barking about something that wasn't done well in hiring. And so those are the pains that you need to solve, and that's how you change process.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm seeing a couple more questions about mitigating cheating. I think we can send some of those resources as follow-up. I think Frank did a great job also covering some of those features. I do like this question because I think we can kind of cover it a little bit more high level as well. Um, Somebody asked, well, I'll set the stage first. They've started using, um, here, I'll just read the question directly. It's going to be way, way harder paraphrasing this one. Sorry, team. I have started asking the candidate to share the desktop and allow them to use open internet, including LLMs. What I observe and evaluate the candidate is how they use all of these and come to a solution. But one candidate just copied the whole question and pasted in ChatGPT, and bam, there was a full solution. So the question, with that context in mind, how do we set these expectations and limits of AI usage beforehand? And I think this is a both an internal question of, like we've talked about, our internal policy in ChatGPT, but or machine learning, but also how do we clearly communicate that ahead of time with the interviewee? So two-parter, guys.
I love this one. I'll go first, then Frank can give the right answer. I mean, I guess, yes, set your policy, be clear. I mean, you guys are emailing candidates, you're communicating with candidates, set it from the beginning. This is the process we're going to run. These are the expectations. This is, what we're looking for. These are the skills. You are allowed, you are not allowed. So I think that's one, that's how you set the expectations. Like, PS, if I give you a question and you just open ChatGPT and dump it in, like, that is not going to get you the job. But what I love about this scenario is, like, that's the flaw with the leak code question. And what I challenge the questioner on is, if that is actually reflective of the job at hand, which it very well could be, what is wrong with the developer who gets a problem from a product manager or however your organization works? They go dump it into, hopefully a quarantined internal LLM, get the answer and deliver the code and the solution, the whatever it is, within 3 minutes. Like, I want to hire that developer. If I get all my developers to give me code like code back features in
Efficient.
3 minutes, like, yes, hire that person tomorrow. So I guess I would also just kind of reframe the thinking. Like, if that was the appropriate question, maybe this is actually the person to hire because they're really savvy at how to use tools to solve their problems.
I
All
think
right,
that's
Frank,
great.
what's the right answer?
No, I mean, I agree with that. I think ultimately you're right. You don't want, it's not about like trying to artificially constrain. That being said, I think there is probably some nuance to this, and I'm not sure about the question being asked, but I would submit it's probably not the right question here. And it's when you have a question, you can just quickly copy and paste. One, I think that probably shows that if you're clear on, hey, what we want to understand is how you properly prompt. Quite honestly, I think if all of us, we probably started with writing a poem or a song with our first use of ChatGPT. And then as we progressed, we wanted to write a paper for us or whatever. And I think we all, for those of you who use it every day, find you can't just simply paste in, hit submit, and the output is good to go. And I think when somebody approaches in that way, it quickly shows that they're probably not used to using these tools. And that's probably the wrong, that is an experience or illustration in and of itself of their approach to prompting or their knowledge of how to use these tools. And so it's both, I guess, a little bit of, is that even the right question being asked, to how they prompt shows you a little bit of this. And that's honestly why we are incorporating, I guess, not sure if you're using CoderPad or not, but like we have everything monitored, so you don't quite have to go to the lengths of sharing screen. And there's some questionable legality around a bunch of screen sharing that we work with some of our enterprise customers on. But beyond that, if you're in a collaborative environment, you don't need to share screen. Two, because we brought the AI assist into this monitored environment, you can actually see the record of how they're prompting and how they're interacting. And so I think we are trying to bring it all together within our product to both allow you to ask the right question and to give you the understanding and the certainty of, oh, they did ask the LLM about this. This is how they prompted it. This is how they continue the conversation to clarify. This is then what they copied and pasted into their code base. And so I think bringing that all together in this one environment should hopefully set you on the right path towards a a better interviewing process.
Hey,
Awesome.
Frank, if you, sorry, can I just piggyback? Frank, if that happened in front of you, what follow-up questions would you ask? Like,
That's
Hey,
some,
what, in other words, you copy the whole solution.
yeah, you're like, I'm the candidate, here's the answer. What follow-up questions do you have?
Yeah. Why did you choose to use that? Was that good code or bad code? Like, what else would you want to know? How, or you could just take it at face value and you could extend the exercise further. How does it continue to scale? Like, what optimizations would you make? What trade-offs? What's missing from this prompt? What else should we consider? I think both into just testing their thinking or to extend it further, right? And I think that's the realism. To your point, like if this is the role or this is the job, then maybe that is the right initial question to ask, but there's so much more that you can continue to do and ask and prompt to understand.
Totally. I think so. We have time for a couple more questions. An anonymous question came in, and I think we've kind of covered it a little bit, but I think this is a great time to just kind of reiterate. What about ethics? How do we check the ethical level of the coder? And I mean, sounds like leaning into soft skills, follow-up questions, really asking important questions or pertinent questions during the live interview. But I would love to hear your opinions. And then, like I said, we have a couple more questions and just a few more minutes. So
I think, being clear on your expectations. Not everybody has the same ethics. Not everybody sees things the same way. Frankly, I don't see any ethical challenges to using the tooling available. But if that is not something you believe in, I think being clear about that as a company is important. And I think having discussions about that. I mean, I think what I was trying to highlight in the last exchange was asking the question and getting the answer is like the first part of an interview or an interview line of query. And so, okay, when do you use AI? When don't you use AI? What are good ways to do this? What are not good ways to do this? Like, would you put our repo into a publicly available free version of Claude or whatever? I hope not.
yeah,
What are the ethics there? Like, what's the business risk, right? Do people understand these tools and are they thinking about this and have the conversation? I think it'd be an interesting discussion to have with candidates to really understand what's important and not important, where their lines are, where your lines are, and what makes sense in the context of the role and the organization.
awesome. Great answer. Frank, do you have anything to add there? We have another question that I would love to answer as well, or love to hear your guys' answer on if we
Yeah.
have time. But if you want to add some context, we have time. We have another minute or two.
No, I mean, I guess, yeah, ultimately, whether you're talking about ethics or some of these other types of approaches where there again is no one right answer, I encourage you to try, as Amanda says, ask during the interview. One thing that we often talk about is speed versus quality. There is no one right answer. Of course, you want both the fastest and the highest quality in terms of code, but ultimately, like understanding somebody's iterative mindset, does their profile fit your how you look at code. You're at an infrastructure company, or you're, where absolutely every line of code is so important and needs to be absolutely right. Well, guess what? You're probably going to shift towards that and the cleanest code and so on. You're at a company that, one of our largest customers that moves fast and breaks things. I think they probably optimize on speed and so on. And it's just, again, understanding and surfacing that throughout the interview process.
Awesome. Thank you. We have one more question from Spain. What is the normal number of interview rounds to not get a bored candidate or not make somebody bored? Their guess is maybe 2 or 3, but would love your input of how that process should look.
I guess it depends on the role and the seniority and all the exclusions, but I would say at least 2 live interviews, one for some sort of like code comprehension, debugging, and one for some sort of systems design, and then maybe a maximum of 4 interviews. I mean, we do work with customers who I think do 8 or 10. I don't think that's a recommended path, but somewhere between 2 and 4 feels right for me, Frank.
Yeah, I'd say it differs from, as Amanda said, role, differs by industry and location. I'd say typical tech company here in the Valley, call it our a lot of our bread and butter, large social media companies and so on, typically have 3 to 4 technical interviews. And then they offset that with a couple, recruiter screens and so on.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you so much, you guys. We are at time. I really appreciate all the thoughtful questions and all the thoughtful answers. We will be following up with a recording in the next 24 to 48 hours, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But other than that, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.